If you or any of your friends are planning to join politics because you want to do something good for the country, here's a friendly piece of advice. Don't. Because despite all the wealth, credentials, and the goodwill that you may possess, politics is not for the faint of heart, because unless you have a big family or some criminal cases, it does not allow you to be a part of the system. Instead, the system throws a daunting question back at you. Remember Kangana, the dissentress in chief against everyone who was involved in nepotism?
सब गैंग बना के बैठे हुए हैं कि मैंने नेपोटिज्म के करके बोला तो इनकी हवाइयां उड़ गई।
आप लोग लेकिन बहुत एक क्लोज निट सर्कल हो और आप लोग काफी मतलब नेपोटिज्म और ये सब देखने को मिलता है।
She took on literally everyone in Mumbai and then she arrived at the Indian Parliament.
मैं कंगना रनौत जो लोकसभा की सदस्य निर्वाचित हुई हूँ, ईश्वर की शपथ लेती हूँ, भारत के संविधान के प्रति सच्ची श्रद्धा और निष्ठा रखूंगी।
Well, it turns out she's a bit of a nepo baby too. Her grandfather was actually an MLA back in Himachal Pradesh. So it's not as if she did not belong to an influential family. But don't get me wrong here. I love Kangana, from Tanu Vets Manu to Queen. She's a fantastic actor and nepotism can actually take you only so far. From there, you have to swim on your own in this ocean that has all the risks. The point I'm trying to make is there are 530 MPs in the Indian Parliament who come from one or the other background of privilege, which means that 98.3% of the Indian Parliament actually have some sort of criminal cases against them, or they have assets exceeding 1 crore rupees, or that they generally have more privilege than the others. Among these, more than 76% of them have what we call as a serious privilege category, which means that they have assets more than 5 crore rupees or more serious criminal cases or some sort of a link to any political dynasty. If you're a political aspirant and you're below the age of 30 years, there's absolutely no place for you in the Indian Parliament as we speak. And let me give you 3 examples to actually prove my point. Pushpendra Saroj of the Samajwadi Party got elected from the Kaushambi seat in Uttar Pradesh. Now, who is she? She belongs to a political family. Her father is Inderjit Saroj, who is the National General Secretary of the Samajwadi Party. He was a 5-time MLA and he has a lot of experience in politics. I'll give you one more example. That is Priya Saroj, who is just 25 years old when she got elected from the Machli Shahar seat. She is the daughter of a 3-time MP from Uttar Pradesh, Tufani Saroj. The point is, these cases of nepotism are not just with one or the other party. It's not just with the Congress or say some of its regional allies like the DMK or even other regional parties like the Shiromani Akali Dal. The general cases of nepotism that we hear, we come under the perception that only one party is promoting it, but unfortunately every other party has it, including the BJP and the NDA. And this just goes to prove that without a political family, it is absolutely impossible for you to sit in the Indian Parliament, and that's the travesty today. This was a serious problem in Indian politics and the Parliament did realize that, which is why 33% reservation for women in Indian politics, especially in the Parliament and local municipal bodies, has already been guaranteed. But the women who are getting elected, they belong to political families again, because now the brother or the father is unable to contest an election. He appoints a kin who can actually represent him in that seat. So they're just there for the sake of it, but they're actually not getting anywhere on their own. And that's the tragedy. But the Prime Minister is aware of this, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi actually made a point last year from the Red Fort address when he spoke during the Independence Day.
राजनीति में भी परिवारवाद ने देश के सामर्थ्य को सबसे ज्यादा अन्याय किया। परिवारवादी राजनीति परिवार की भलाई के लिए होती है, उसको देश की भलाई से कोई लेना देना नहीं।
And he said that he wants to create 1 lakh young leaders who have absolutely no linkages to any dynasty, because credit where due, he is the only person in recent political history who's been able to make it to the top without having any political dynasty or money or any other sort of privilege. But will he really be able to create this young new blood that he's actually talking about? It's an uphill task. And let me explain how, using 2 cases to prove my point, which is my home state of Karnataka and Maharashtra as an example. Now, why? Because the BJP has been criticizing dynastic politics everywhere, but it has admitted that it's been somewhat hypocritical when it comes to these 2 states, especially because they've been dependent on these dynasts, because the new generation leaders are simply not propping up because because the space for them has not been created. So let's explore this hypocrisy a little bit more, right? And explain what privilege is for those of you watching this who already have it and don't seem to actually acknowledge it. To those of you who are still finding it hard to understand this concept, let me use the example of Bollywood. Just like Bollywood, Indian politics also remains an exclusive realm for those with the right connection. Sure, it promises dreams, fame, money and power, but unless you have the right connections, it's almost impossible for you to get into this ultra elite realm which functions as the high society in India. You see, Indian society is called as a network society because kinship actually matters a lot. Who you are, whether you have a family member placed somewhere else, and the matter of trust comes into the whole picture. So if you're a freshly new face, freshly starting off in a career where you want to bring about change, you want to do something for yourself in the country, it's almost impossible for you to get through. Now, this network society actually operates on the basis of caste, community, money, or even goodwill, where unless you know somebody, you can't really get inside that particular network. So you see, kinship is not just related to those people with family connections, but also is generally used in politics. If you observe, Mahatma Gandhi was known as Bapu, which means father. Jawaharlal Nehru, India's first prime minister, was known as Chacha, which means uncle. And even former chief minister of Uttar Pradesh, Mayawati, was known as Behenji, which means sister. So what do they try to actually establish here? They try to establish that the Indian voter is somehow related to these people so that they become a part of their family. And that's the reason politicians actually address you in a certain way of speaking. You see, in India, Bollywood and politics remains only for the select few, those who have family connections. Which is why whether it's the Mufis of Kashmir or the Yadavs of Uttar Pradesh or the Reddys in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, a few people are already at an advantage compared to you. In the Indian Parliament this time, just 20% of the Indian MPs have actually been able to get passed without having a certain privilege, which means that 108 members out of the 500 odd MPs that are totally elected. And among these, only 8.1% of the MPs actually come from no dynasty or background and do not belong to the privileged categories. And this is a really saddening number. You take the case of the women MPs, the 74 of them who have been elected to the Indian Parliament, 63% of them belong to one political family or the other, which means that without any money or dynastic power, even women are not able to make it in politics. You see, the BJP actually tried to experiment with this model ahead of the 2024 Lok Sabha elections in Maharashtra. See, Maharashtra is a very crucial state for any party in the Lok Sabha because it has 48 Lok Sabha seats. They were trying to win as many as possible and they were trying to find candidates who did not belong to a dynasty and they wanted to actually promote grassroots workers. But there was one problem. These grassroots workers did not have the potential in them to actually win because the voters wanted people belonging to political dynasties to be there. So what did they do? Out of the 20 candidates that they announced initially, 9 of them belong to major political parties. And let me read off the list to you. Hina Gavit, who is the daughter of Vijay Kumar Gavit, who had contested from Nandurbar. Bharati Pawar, daughter of Arjun Pawar, contesting from Dindori. Pankaja Munde, daughter of Gopinath Munde. Piyush Goyal, son of Chandrakant Goyal, who contested from Mumbai North. He is also a Union Cabinet Minister. Sujay VK Patil, son of Radhakrishna VK Patil from Ahmednagar. So the list goes on and on. The irony was very palpable, right? I mean, the BJP actually entered the political fray in Maharashtra, fighting nepotism and dynasty, because you look at the Shindes, now the Shinde family also is sort of become a dynasty after Eknath Shinde became the chief minister and now his son is an MP from Mumbai. The Thakres also are a political family. So the BJP tried to be somewhat different from them, but ultimately towards the end they had to give it up. But in their defense, they say that it is not out of choice, but it is out of compulsion because they also had to win the elections and that it was very important to them. And don't even get me started on Karnataka because I have a lot to rant because all the three parties in my home state have been accused accused of nepotism, whether it's the Janata Dal Secular, the Congress or the BJP. Everybody is lining up to promote their own nephews or their nieces or their daughters or their sons. And this is to a point where people don't even care. They've continued to vote for them because they have no other choice. I'll give you two such examples. There was a recent by-poll which was held to 3 assembly constituencies in Karnataka, and 2 of the former chief ministers, Basavaraj Bommai, who belonged to the BJP, and H.D. Kumaraswamy, who belongs to the JDS, both their sons contested from Shiggaon and Channapatna. Now, with all the influence, anti-incumbency against the Congress because the Uda scandal, the Valmiki scam, the farmers' movement against Waqf was actually picking up steam, everybody thought that this was a sure shot victory. And surprise, surprise, people actually decided to punish them and vote for somebody else. So both Nikhil Kumaraswamy and Bharat Bommai lost from relatively safe constituencies, which means that there is hope in this world, that people are somewhat standing up against nepotism, but it's also possible that people voted for some other reason. We will never know, and that's the reality of politics. If you look at the Congress, don't even get me started, because more than 14 out of the 28 Lok Sabha candidates this time that the Congress actually fielded were directly related to some or the other political dynasties. And what was their excuse? Their excuse was winnability, that we needed people with already influence, power and money who can actually reach out to the voters and defeat their nearest opponents, which is the BJP and the JDS. I'm sorry to paint this doomsday scenario that there is absolutely no hope in politics at all, but if you are a political aspirant, know that it's almost an impossible task for you to get through in Indian politics. If you're coming from no background and you don't have a lot of money, or you don't have the muscle power that it requires for you to intimidate people or build that aura and respect around you. So does it mean that there is absolutely no hope? I don't think so. You look at the Western democracies, they've built some sort of internal mechanisms to make sure that there are cleaner candidates who come from the grassroots level. There are people from the bureaucracy and the intellectual circles who've also made it. And there are a lot of Indians, second generation and third generation in the US, UK and Canada, who actually made it to politics in their own countries. And this has been established. But does it mean that the Western democracies are perfect? Absolutely not. So what can India do? Well, there are a few options, but it seems almost impossible, but nevertheless, it's my duty to say so, so I'm going to say it anyway. One, parties can build an internal mechanism to actually sort out their meritorious candidates, and they promote them according to whatever frameworks they operate on. Secondly, there has to be stricter election financing laws, in the sense that every candidate, even if he is absolutely disadvantaged, needs to have some level playing field in politics. Then you'll see a lot of new political entrants come into the aspect of politics, in the spectrum of politics. You need more doctors, lawyers, engineers, politicians. You need journalists who enter the Indian parliament, because they represent a diverse bunch of people in the Indian society who can bring in a certain perspective and make sure that there are cleaner candidates in India. Because every other industries, whether you talk of Bollywood or whether you talk about the Indian industry, whether it's the business, you see that the CEO's son almost becomes a CEO all the time. You see that a Bollywood actor's son or daughter becomes an actor or an actress themselves. And everybody looks up to the Indian parliament and the Indian politics and says that, these people are not perfect. There are criminals sitting there. There are people belonging to dynastic families sitting there. So why are we imposing these moral standards on ourselves when our own politicians who are sitting there, who needs to set a template for the country, are themselves not perfect? So in order to bring that change, it has to be a trickle-down effect. And it has to begin with politics, and cleaner candidates must get evolved. And for this, the most important point is the voters need to stop voting for people who simply belong to powerful political dynasties. It doesn't mean that there are not good people who also belong to political dynasties. There are excellent people who made very good politicians despite coming from a privileged background, but those numbers are very limited. It means that the awareness has to increase. It means that the public pressure should be so much that the political parties think twice before fielding any candidate, because ultimately public perception matters a lot.